Are you looking to make exploration more memorable for your players? Do you find yourself fast forwarding travel just to get to the good parts? Well, today I'm going to share some tips and tricks I use to make exploration memorable for my tables. Some techniques that I use to bring immersion and agency to my players. Let's get started. So one of the things about 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons is it's kind of hard to get a handle on exploration as a pillar. You know, the DMG only spends a handful of pages on it, and it's mostly catered to outdoor environments or travel paces. So, you know, because the scaffolding for the exploration pillar is so sparse, you know, many DMs and GMs tend to fast travel their players through locations and environments, you know, using montages as a way to narrate days, sometimes weeks of activity. And to be clear, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, if your table is more focused on combat and role play, you know, have at it. It's your table, your rules. But what I'm going to share with you today is how to turn exploration into an opportunity to enhance all aspects of your game, of your setting, and to bring life to what you're building there with your players. So what really got me started on fleshing out exploration as a pillar in D&D was my love of the Monster Hunter video game series. So for those of you who aren't familiar, in it you play a hunter who parties with other hunters, and you're tasked with going on quests to find tracks and search for these vicious monsters through these fantastic locations. And it always ends in an epic boss battle and tons of triumph and tragedy, and it's a phenomenal game. Highly recommend it. So a few years ago, Steam Forged Games was running a Kickstarter for a board game version of Monster Hunter World. So, of course, I jumped right on it. The gameplay on this board game is phenomenal, top-notch, but what I love about it are the minis that came with it. So not only did they package it with all of your hero minis, but also the monster minis. And here, this is one of my favorites, is this Nergigante right here. He's a vicious one. So I really wanted to use these beautiful sculpts in my D&D games, you know? So I looked around for some homebrew stat blocks to see, you know, what was in the community, and came across this phenomenal gem. Amellwind's Guide to Monster Hunting takes the core loop of the video game and turns it into a 5e compatible setting. And here's how it works. It breaks down these quests into hunts for a specific monster. So first, you'll select a monster in a territory. The territory will be broken up into all these different areas that, you know, take some time to travel between. But during a hunt, and this is important, each member of the party is assigned a role. You have the trailblazer, and they get to decide which way the party goes. They use survival checks to determine what kind of encounter the party comes across. You have scouts that run ahead into the area and use their stealth and perception to get an idea of what's going on. You have a spotter that investigates the area for any signs of tracks or resources that might be of value. And then you also can have this artisan that prepares foods for the hunt that give off different boons and effects. But you as a DM, you prepare a table of possible encounters. These can be major challenges such as combat or hazards, minor challenges that act as setbacks, resource attrition, signs of the monster you're tracking. So you usually have to collect a certain number of signs to find the monster, and benefits such as powerful NPCs that could help. The encounter table is designed for a D20 roll and goes from most challenging encounters up to any possible benefits. Now, the exploration cycle works like this. The Trailblazer rolls a survival check. The DC is based on the hunt and the territory's setting. For instance, on a clear day, it might be an easier check to traverse the jungle than if there is a massive rainstorm pouring down on the party. After that, if the survival check succeeds, they roll an encounter using a d20. But if they fail, they roll a d10. The type of encounter is rolled, the DM determines what is going on in that area, and then the scout enters. Now, the scout rolls stealth and perception checks, and depending upon how those go and the type of encounter, the scene sort of plays out from there. Afterwards, the spotter can do an investigation check to find the tracks or any resources, and this continues until the party finds enough tracks and confronts the monster and vanquishes the foe. Here's what this guide gets right, okay? First, these rules make you feel like you're playing the video game. It makes you feel like you are on the ancestral steppe, tracking a velocidrome across the plains and finding tracks along the way. It puts you in the setting for sure. But as a DM, I loved that I could prep a hunt, hand my players a map, and then see what story the dice had to tell that day. Everyone at the table felt like their choices were meaningful, that their roles mattered, and their immersion into this world was tangible. And I'll tell you too, the resource attrition is real with this setup. So when the party finally found the Nergigante deep in the Wildspire Wastes, well, there was serious tension. They only had so many spell slots. They only had so much HP. It was an epic battle for sure. And I've run many hunts using this framework and had great sessions thanks to Amellwind's Guide to Monster Hunting. If you're looking to run games like that, I can't recommend it enough. Please check it out. So running these games got me thinking, how can I take the philosophies of exploration, some of the mechanics done so well for this Monster Hunter setting, and apply them to other settings? So here are the things that I like about this framework that I want to put into something that's more applicable to others. First, your players have roles. Your ranger that invested in survival and your rogue that sneaks in the shadows, they both have meaningful opportunities to shine here. 2, I can prep a region and reuse it multiple times with only minor tweaks. That cuts down on a lot of the heavy lifting we do as DMs. So any opportunity to optimize on that front, I will gladly take. And 3, there is no railroading. The players pick the path and the dice tell the story. So how can I take the things I like and make it work for any setting? And here's what I came up with. First up, we want to define the region. This can be a chunk of wilderness to explore, or a treacherous road, underground cavern system in the Underdark, whatever. Then we're going to break the region up into smaller areas, into chunks. We want to make them memorable points of interest, and here I like to harness some of the lessons from Sly Flourish's fantastic locations. And the Alexandrian actually has a great list of resources around Pointcrawls if you're interested in making things more plot specific happen in certain locations. But any way you slice it, the idea here is that define your region, break it up into smaller chunks. Next up, we're going to create an encounter table. Now, the Amellwind's Guide to Monster Hunting crafted their encounter table tailored around the idea of tracking and hunting a monster. But for this to work in any setting that I choose, here's how I generally tend to craft the table. So again, this is a D20 table. 1 through 5, I do as combat encounters. 6 through 10 are hazards and traps. 11 through 15 are discovery and exploration. And then 16 through 20 are social. And depending upon how punishing or forgiving I want to be, I might adjust the ranges here and there, but the general idea holds. So low on the table are resource heavy encounters. High on the table are resource light encounters, sometimes even beneficial ones. And finally, we'll set the survival DC for the Trailblazer. Again, the idea here is that success on this DC check opens up the possibilities to some beneficial things, whereas failure kind of pushes them toward the lower end heavy resource use encounters. Finally, we'll want to write our encounters. Again, we have combat encounters, hazards and traps, discovery, exploration, and social encounters. For combat, I'll come up with a table that's pretty general for the region, but I'll also add some specific keyed encounters that I want to happen if combat is to occur in a specific location. And I'll do the same thing for hazards and traps. So for instance, if we're in a swamp, just about everywhere might have an opportunity for razor vines or swamp gas. But in a certain location, you might just find yourself in a field of noxious spores. Who knows? Now, designing discovery and exploration encounters really helps immerse the players in the world you're crafting. This lets us as DMs naturally add lore to the sessions without it feeling like a big ol' info dump. You know, maybe the party's discovered the ruins of an ancient battlefield from a forgotten kingdom, or they've come across a druid's ritual site for healing the wood. You know, here we have a chance to drop information about our setting, but also potential plot hooks, and see what really captures the imagination of our players. Now, finally, social encounters, these are what bring the region to life. It makes the world we're building here feel lived in. You know, we want them to feel like this is a thriving ecosystem, regardless if they're in the middle of the woods or in the underground tunnels of a city. You know, maybe the party comes across a wood elf patrol who demands that they state their business, or a traveling huckster looking to sell their version of snake oil. You know, through these social encounters, the party gets a very clear idea on the pulse of the region they're exploring, and it lets us as DMs and storytellers flesh it out, bring immersion, and make our sessions feel so much more rich. Now, with that framework in mind, here I'm going to share with you a sample of an exploration I ran. This was for a party looking to find a hag's hut within the quivering forest. So we had our roles, we had our trailblazer rolling for navigation, we had our scout doing stealth and perception checks, and our spotter was on the lookout for any signs of the hag's whereabouts whatsoever. I took this region of the quivering forest and divided it into 10 areas. I came up with a map, connected them in such a way so that it didn't feel necessarily linear. And for each of the locations, I just came up with a quick description that I wanted to think about, and then keyed in some specific encounters that would happen within those locations. You know, then I came up with my table outlining the same that we just discussed earlier. You know, combat encounters being 1 through 5, hazards and traps 6 through 10, exploration encounters 11 through 15, and social encounters being 16 through 20. So for my combat encounters, I had a simple, D4 table essentially with harpies, ankegs, displacer beasts, and blink dogs. So if the party encountered anything in a particular region, I would roll on that table if it was a combat encounter and see what popped up. But I also had specifically a red cap surprise in mind for one of these regions. So if they did find themselves in this location and they didn't pass the survival check, and on their luck check they rolled low on that combat to get the combat, that was the one I had in my pocket to run. Next up for the hazards and traps, like I mentioned, some general, like poison ivy overgrowth, mudslides, that sort of thing. But I also had another, keyed encounter here for some border traps at the entrance of the forest. So that was in place if they were there and didn't get through well enough. Now for the exploration and discovery, again, I came up with, these are just, D4 tables here, so it's not taking a ton of prep here, but really just capturing little vignettes. So a crumbling obelisk, is seen in the distance, vines are growing from it, it's covered with abyssal runes, all this good juicy stuff for our players to really get a hold on. There's also like an opportunity to catch a golden elk in the distance, or find a purified oasis to bring some relief. And then when it came to the social encounters, these are really, fun opportunities for us as DMs to throw some NPCs in the mix. So I had 3 pixies as a possibility, Twinkle, Trinkle, and Dot, that ask pretty much like dad joke style riddles, and depending upon how the party does, they might get some goodies from the pixies. Also I added in some other things too, like these 3 tired satyrs who were trying to flee from their home because it's been invaded by all of these sleep demons. So again, it's opportunities to flesh out some of the living inhabitants of your region. And again, dangle a few little plot hooks for your players to see if they bite. That the opportunity to go and fight some sleep demons might apply and really entice some of your folks. So what's great about the prep I did for this region is that I can reuse lots that's here. The party will only encounter a fraction of what I've written. Their first pass might have them fight redcaps and trudge through the heavy rain and discover a forgotten obelisk, but their next adventure might have them face to face with harpies, before running into 3 tired satyrs who are looking to flee the wood. Because of this framework, I can run multiple sessions in the same region and have it feel fresh and alive each time. And it lets my players live longer in the world and bring it to life as well. I hope you found this useful. I'm really interested to hear what aspects of exploration you find challenging as a DM. Let me know what you think in the comments. But thanks, y'all. I'm Cody from Dungeon Mechanic, wishing you memorable travels.